graduate student of archaeology, they were genuine human footprints, and she sent me photographs of them as well. So on that basis, although I was originally skeptical about this particular case, now I'm pretty much convinced that they do have evidence there of human footprints in the same layers of rock with dinosaur footprints. So yes, I think there is evidence that humans were present at the same time as the dinosaurs.
Fascinating. And so far, I guess, in your research, do you suggest in any way that humans living back then did have, more advanced, but some kind of evidence for civilizations or not just, caveman type, human beings running around in that sense, but actually that there were more advanced civilizations around, and if so, how far do you go, so to speak, with that?
Well, I think there are two kinds of evidence for the level of culture of these ancient humans, human civilizations. One is what you can find in the layers of the rock. Admittedly, I have to say I think there's enough to show that humans were present. There are human footprints, there are human bones, there are artifacts that are of the kind that archaeologists normally attribute to humans. But they may look fairly primitive to us today, stone mortars and pestles, for example. Those are, according to archaeologists, only humans of our level of intelligence can make those things. But to the average person, they look pretty primitive. It's not like a computer or a jet airplane.
Sure.
Now, but there are other types of evidence for what these civilizations were capable of, and this evidence is found in the records left by the ancient civilizations. They're historical records which have been passed down from generation to generation. For example, the ancient Sanskrit writings of India tell us that these ancient civilizations had spacecraft, that they could travel from planet to planet by vehicles called, in Sanskrit, vimanas. And they also mentioned that they had electricity. They were able to use electricity. They had weapons that resembled modern nuclear weapons. They, according to these ancient histories, the ancient civilizations also had a high level of scientific knowledge. For example, the ancient Sanskrit writings describe observations of how the human embryo develops from a single cell that begins to divide into 2 and 4. This is knowledge that European scientists didn't have until the invention of the microscope in the 16th century AD. So, yes, I think these ancient civilizations, if you're asking me what I believe, I believe that in the past, some of these ancient civilizations did have very high levels of technology. But I think also that the level of civilization has risen and fallen many times. Actually, the Greek philosophers, Aristotle and Plato, they said this, that human civilizations have come and gone over vast periods of cyclical time, and that there have been repeated catastrophes that have wiped out civilizations, and then things have had to start up again from a more simple platform. So I think the history of a human presence on this planet is a very complex one.
Indeed. An interesting side note here perhaps, but I have an article up on redicecreations.com right now that theorizes a bit about that atomic theory is an ancient science, and that there is records of this in the Vedic texts, and on a side note to that, even don't know if you know this or not, but Robert Oppenheimer, one of the guys behind the development of the atomic bomb, after one of the first tests that they did on the atomic bomb, he actually quoted Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu to be more precise, and he said, I think, now I am become death, meaning that he made a reference to potentially, I don't know, some of the ancient warfare that perhaps might have been going on this planet. So I don't know, does this guy know something that most of us don't?
Well, yes, Robert Oppenheimer, in addition to being a great physicist, was also a student of Sanskrit. He studied Sanskrit at the University of California at Berkeley, and he was a student of the Bhagavad Gita. And in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a description where the Hindu god Krishna manifests what's called the universal form. And the manifestation of this universal form is described as like a bright light, as brilliant as the sun, expanding throughout the entire universe with tremendous force and heat, which is exactly like a description of an atomic explosion, which is why I think Oppenheimer cited that passage from the Bhagavad Gita when he saw the first atomic bomb test at Alamogordo, New Mexico in 1945.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned the ancient Sanskrit writings having the atomic theory, which they did. Actually, I've just been reading some passages where they describe how to calculate time according to movements of atoms, which is something that we've just recently learned to do.
Yeah.
We have atomic clocks now, but that knowledge of atomic clocks is something that's been there for thousands of years.
Yeah, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Again, there's so many alleys that we can go from here. We don't have that much time left in this segment, but before we end things off in the first segment here, we got to address a little bit, I guess, on some points on the suppression of this knowledge. I mean, you detailed a few examples for us here, then for us, and so the question is, this information, has it been, do you think, consciously suppressed or simply ignored because, as you talked about earlier, because of this knowledge filter and so forth? I mean, there are these two sides to it all the time, but in a way it feels like the scientific community in this instance is kind of religious in a way. They're clinging to the theory very, very, tremendously, because science in a way should be about having an open mind, and the evidence that comes to you, that should be the theory that you adapt, or the what do you think? What's going on here? Why the tremendous resistance to this information?
Well, I think there's a few reasons for it. I think in one sense it's just human nature. For example, if I love somebody and then somebody tells me something bad about the person I love, I don't want to believe it. I